Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I am so honored to be joined by the new head women's basketball coach, Stasia King. Stasia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure, and of course, we're being joined by Nightly News reporter Blake Myers. Blake, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for the invite back.
And one of the reasons we wanted to have Stasia, and of course we wanted to get to meet her and allow all of our listeners to get to meet her as well, but we are right in the middle of our fall slate of basketball games. You can see every game at our YouTube channel on Nightly News Media Club at Central Penn College. If you just give that a search, it will come right up and you can check out every game. And of course, on demand after the fact at cpcnightlynews.com. So first of all, Stasia, I want to welcome you to campus. It's such a wonderful opportunity to get to chat with you here today. And we have, and as I'm sure you know, we've been covering the team for many years now and are so happy and honored that we get to do that. We've already gotten out to opening day. It was such a great day. I know it wasn't the results you were hoping for, but just to get back out on that court and support what you all are doing, it was just such a pleasure for us to do. And so I want to get a chance for us to get to know you a little bit and learn a little bit more about your background and how you ended up here. And then I'm going to throw it to Blake to maybe ask some more specific questions toward the season, this year that you're going through. So obviously you're from the area. Where were you born in Harrisburg? I know you went to Harrisburg High School as as your high school experience, but are you from the area?
Yeah, so I'm a native to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Were you born in Harrisburg Hospital?
Hershey Hospital.
Okay, because I was born in Harrisburg Hospital.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So I'm a native as well. So I've lived in this area all of my life. But yeah, so how does it feel like? Of course, we'll get to some of the things in the middle, but how does it feel to be able to have this experience, basically? 5 minutes from where you went to high school? Like, what does it feel like to be here and coaching the Knights?
Wow, it's such a surreal feeling. To be able to be a head coach first at the collegiate level is a dream come true, and then also to coach at a college that is essentially 10, 15 minutes from where I grew up. It allows for a lot of community support to come out, in addition to our campus community, but it feels really good when my grandmother doesn't have to drive 3 hours to see me coach or play basketball. She can just literally drive 10 minutes down the road, so it's awesome.
I think you're lucky if you're getting there in 3 hours. What we're talking about is Stasia played and then went on to have a graduate assistantship and video coordinator position later at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, one of my favorite places. I actually was just out there not too long ago for a Pitt game. I actually went to Slippery Rock, so
cool.
I spent a lot of time in Western Pennsylvania, let's just say that. So you played at Duquesne. You made 4 consecutive WNIT berths. So you were obviously extremely successful at the college level. So tell me a little bit about not only why you ended up going to Duquesne, but what it was like to play for such a very competitive collegiate team.
So yes, originally it was to experience a new culture because like I said, I grew up in Harrisburg, spent a lot of my time in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I wanted to be able to explore a little bit, go outside of my comfort zone. And Duquesne was one of the first schools that had reached out to me. Coach Dan Burt had recruited me since I was a junior in high school. So we built that relationship early on. And as I continued throughout my high school career, Duquesne was the constant. I ended up signing right before my senior season started. And I was in awe to be able to go to Pittsburgh for the first time and just see the bridges, the buildings. It was just so different than being in Harrisburg. So it was pretty much love at first sight when I got to the city, and then to meet the team. Susie McConnell-Serio was the head coach at the time, and they had such success. They had just knocked off Ohio State. At the time, it was a mid-major school. I felt that I could compete at that level within Atlantic 10, and then we also played some Philadelphia schools, so that allowed for my family to be able to see me play. So it was a no-brainer for me at the time, absolutely, to go to Duquesne.
So tell me about your maybe outside of college. Like, what is your favorite restaurant in Pittsburgh, for example, in case anybody wants to go out to Pittsburgh and wants to go to a good place?
Oh, man. Put me on. Okay, so I am a lover of meats. I am a a carnivore, a bit to say, but Showcase Barbecue is actually my favorite place to go.
Okay.
I love. They have this entree where you can get the ribs, you can get the chicken, and you can get the sides, and it's a plentiful amount. And I don't know what the secret sauce is, but the sauce is phenomenal. So if you're ever in Pittsburgh, Showcase Barbecue is a place to go.
That's awesome. My favorites are probably Fatheads is down on Carson Street, and I also like the Church Brewery. If you ever get out to the Church, it's just north of South Side, and it is in like this 1800s old church. It's like the coolest place you will ever go. I take my kids there. Like it's family friendly, really, really awesome place. But I'll definitely have to check out the barbecue
I know
spot.
exactly what you're talking about because Duquesne is right next to the South Side. So Fatheads is definitely another place that you want to stop at.
Love
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, that's cool. So you played all 4 years at Duquesne. You were obviously very, very successful in terms of how the teams did. And then when college was over, you came back and coached for, I believe, one season at CD at Central Dauphin?
One season at Central Dauphin East.
Yes. And then you went on to coach at your alma mater at Harrisburg.
Yes.
So tell me what it was like to get that phone call about coming back and coaching the team that you'd played for just a few years prior.
Okay, so originally, when I first moved back after graduating, I was supposed to be on the Harrisburg staff, but unfortunately, Coach Lee didn't have any spots. So at the time when I played at Harrisburg High School, CD East were our rivals. So it was a little.
I was wondering about that.
So I was a little skeptical to go over there, but Larry Moore at the time was my head coach too. So I had 2 years with Larry Moore, and I had finished my junior and my senior year with DeJuan Lee. So I was like, okay, if Coach Moore can go over here, then maybe there's a chance for East. So I spent 1 year at East, and then after that, Coach Lee had called me and said, hey, I have an opening. Are you interested? I was like, absolutely. So being able to go back to essentially my roots and be able to give back to those student athletes and really teach some of the lessons that I had learned being a college athlete, because a lot of those student athletes at the time, they were a really good basketball team, and they had aspirations to be college athletes as well. So being able to give them a firsthand experience on what work ethic looked like, being able to balance your schedule, being a student first, and then handling the athletic responsibilities was very key at the time. So for me, it was just such a rewarding experience, especially to come back as an alumni and for not only Coach Lee, but for the girls on the basketball team to welcome me with open arms. It was just it was an enchanting experience.
And you got to do that, and you took some serious hardware in 2018, winning the District 3 PIAA Mid-Penn Conference Championship, and then you went on to compete for the district title as well, which you won, correct?
Yes.
So you had an amazing 2018, but then it came time for you to go back to your college alma mater. You went back for grad school and became a graduate assistant and video coordinator at Duquesne. Now, how obviously, I think we understand generally moving from a high school experience to a very prestigious college is sort of a no-brainer, but it had to have hurt, like doing all of that, leading your team to the title, and then to move on after that. So tell me a little bit about that thought process of making the move from Harrisburg back to Duquesne.
So Coach Lee had announced that he was retiring. And I was like, wow, Coach Lee's retiring. It would be a great opportunity, because we had talked about it as I was a student athlete and as I was transitioning out of college, like, hey, one day I would like to be the head coach at Harrisburg High School. Like, that was my dream. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I needed a little bit more experience. Outside of everything else, I passed the test, but it was like, hey, we got to get you more experience to be able to be a head coach. And ironically, COVID was just happening at the same time. And, Coach Burt had posted on Facebook that he needed a graduate assistant. His last GA had dropped out because of the COVID scares. And at the time, I was a little bummed because I didn't get the head coaching job, but, I took that feedback and I just ran with it. Coach Lee reached out to Coach Burt on my behalf, and the rest was history. He, Coach Burt was in awe, welcoming me back to the program.
Just like they always say, one door closes, another opens.
Yes.
While it was very difficult for you not to have that opportunity to be the head coach, you now had this opportunity at an amazing school in which you helped them reach even higher heights than even when you had been there. I mean, yes. So we kind of talked about this a little bit about even though your technical term was video coordinator, you were essentially an assistant coach. You were there to help the team in whatever way that you could, and it just seems like it was an amazing experience for you. And you were there for 3 seasons, correct, at Duquesne?
Yes.
When you went back. So okay, so you're coming from Duquesne, you're coming from this, unbelievably wonderful college in Western Pennsylvania. What was the key for you to come back home? Like, let's bring the pendulum back the other way. What was it about Central Penn that called you back to this area?
So after 3 years at Duquesne, it was apparent that I wanted to move up within the coaching ranks. That's just
Fair.
any aspiration. When you're out here in the careers, you want to move up. And I had some other offers to be able to, again, be director of basketball operations or to pursue another video coordinator role. And at the time, thinking back on it, I was like, wow, I had just got engaged to my fiance. We have my sister that we adopted who's at the house. So I was really taking the time to reflect on how much time I was actually spending on the road as a Division I employee on the coaching staff. And so we had come to the realization that we wanted to be home. We wanted to be around more family, have more family supports and things like that. And it was settled. I was actually going to take a hiatus from college coaching to focus on family, being newly engaged and being this parent. And then something said, search one more time. Maybe we can find something in the area. And then I seen that Central Penn had an opening. And I asked my fiance, I was like, hey, look, it's actually part-time. It's not full-time. It's not going to be that much traveling. I tried to sell it the best that I could. We were like, yes, go for it. And then, I sat down with Casey. We had an interview session, and she talked to me about Central Penn and some of the things that you guys have been doing here, which I was excited to jump on the horse and be a part of pushing the progress here for athletics. And the rest was history. So, yeah.
And as we sort of transition into Blake here, and I want to bring Blake in because Blake this year, one of the things that we are doing, we are always trying to get better. Mm-hmm. We are, even though, from where we started to where we are today, we're so happy every year we try to improve. But the one thing that we really wanted to push this year is to have a sole reporter for both the men's and women's teams, which we do. So we do have Blake Myers here. Blake is actually covering the women's team. He's going to be writing up articles for cpcnightlynews.com. So I wanted to turn over to Blake to give him the opportunity to ask a few questions. I know he knows the women's team really well, so I want to see what sort of questions that Blake has about the women's team and the really good start, 4-1 start as we record here today on the season.
So I think the biggest thing going into this season was finding a good scoring threat. Tanai Jackson, former Central Penn Knight last year, led the team in almost every category. I wanted to ask about Anai Robinson and the impact you felt from her scoring ability so far.
I think that Ane she's a scoring problem at will. She's one of those players that can create her own shot, and she doesn't really need much help getting to the basket. I will say she needs a little bit of help on defense, Blake. So if you could help us out with that. But no, Ane is 100% a student athlete that could compete at low D1 mid-major Division I basketball. But again, Ane's story is so special because you actually see the effects of COVID with her. So you see the effects of the transfer portal and things like that. Coaches wanting to get those kids who are already experienced in the college realm, already know how to manage a schedule and things like that. And a lot of high school student athletes, unless you were top of the top and unless you were coming from a winning program, you kind of got overlooked. And to our blessings, I coached Ane for 1 year before I left Harrisburg High School, and I stayed in contact with her throughout my time at Duquesne. And then when I came back and got the head coaching job and found out that Ane was not going, she didn't get any offers, I was like, wow, come to Central Penn. Let's see what we can do from here with you. Let's give you a crash course in being a student athlete and see if it's something that you're willing to buy into. And I would like to say, for Ane being a freshman, she's held herself very well in a classroom and on a basketball court. There are some things that we have to clean up, but for the most part, Ane has been everything that you would want in an incoming freshman.
Now, granted, only one game that we actually got to see, but the one thing with Brandy Swinton being out in that contest, the one thing that was fairly evident to you, I'm sure, is just the size and some of the times that we're going to have to kind of play differently based on having a smaller lineup. One of the things that jumps out to me right now is Anai's averaging over 6 rebounds a game from the point guard position. So how does her rebounding prowess help an otherwise small lineup?
It helps because Ane can play multiple positions on the floor. So when we do go small, Ane plays the 4 for us. And sometimes she might play the 5, so she'll play the post for us. But the amount of rebounds that Ane is able to get, it just speaks to her competitiveness. Ane wants the ball in her hands 10 times out of 10. And if that means that I have to go get rebounds to be able to do that, that's what Ane is willing to do.
One thing that I found super special about this year's team compared to the past 2 since I've been here and been covering the women's team, there seems to be a lot of depth on the bench. From past years, it seems like we've had maybe 2 or 3 scorers on the bench or something, but you guys have a veteran Sydney Bubb who can go in the corner and hit some threes, play some good defense.
Former Nightly News Player of the Year.
Former Nightly News Player of the Year. And you just have a lot of experience and a lot of ability on the bench. How does that help you?
I think it allows us the flexibility to, like you said, Paul, play different lineups, and we can play different. Depending on who we're playing, we might go big, we might go small, and we have players who can play in different positions. So it allows us flexibility offensively and defensively. I mean, in practice, I go crazy about I call myself a mad scientist because I like to mix up the lineups. I like to see what we can do with a fast lineup or what we can do with a bigger lineup and see offensively and defensively how we look. So being able to have depth is everything. And I'm hoping to keep our girls healthy throughout the season. So that's something that, we can continue to have as we continue to compete.
Another thing that came to mind here is, so like Paul said with the height differences, what plan of attack do you plan on using versus a team with height? Do you plan on going with speed? Do you plan on going with a full defensive lineup? Or do you plan on just putting whoever's out there and trying to match up with the height?
It depends on what team particularly we're talking about. Again, what are we trying to accomplish in that game? If it's a team that we think that we can run on, then possibly a fast lineup. But I would like to say that basketball is a game of runs, so it all depends on what we need in that moment. And the fact that we're able to be flexible in our lineups, that's something that we practice. We practice situations. We practice with different lineups just to see, like I said, what it'll look like production wise, whether it's defensively or offensively, when we are playing these teams.
Now, one question that I had, and this was actually a question, we're having a sports broadcasting class this term, and that's why we've got so many people at these games because it's part of our class this semester. And one of the things that we had talked about is scouting. How do you scout your opponents? Not everybody is going to do broadcasts like we do. How do you actually scout your opponents other than maybe just asking colleagues that you have in the industry? I mean, if there's no game film available, it's got to be difficult, right?
Very difficult. YouTube and Huddle have been my best friend at this level. A lot of our games are streamed. If we go and check out some of our opponents, you do have to do a bit of digging. But I use YouTube and then, figure out what the players' offensive tendencies are. And then we break it down. My assistant coach and I, we break it down from there. So we like to see, how are they guarding screening action? What plays are they calling out of a timeout? Are they pressing right from the beginning of the game, or is it something that they're maybe saving later? So those are some of the things that we look at when we can find the game film. Unfortunately, the game film is not always going to be readily available. So we typically scout by roster, and then as we're going in the game, my assistant coach is always constantly, again, looking, how are they guarding screens? Are they in the man? Are they primarily in a zone? And we kind of go from there. So for the games that we are able to prepare, we do. And for some games, we have to prepare as we play. Like, we have to prep as we play.
Can I just ask, look, I know the benefits of doing live stream. It's something I've been super passionate about, so much so that it's really evolved here to now 3 sports. And that's wonderful in terms of, from a recruit standpoint, parents can watch the whole 9 yards. Do you think it's a disadvantage that everyone's got film on you, whereas you don't have film on all the other teams?
No, I don't think it's a disadvantage at all.
I love the answer.
No. I don't think it's a disadvantage because, I learned early on at Duquesne, I had some really good mentors, and there, we had offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. You can prepare for everything, but you're not going to be able to stop it all. So I don't think it's a disadvantage. It just allows us to be more disciplined. It allows us the opportunity to be better at executing our stuff.
And you can also watch it after the fact, too.
There you
which
go.
also helps. So even though they might be watching it, you can watch it, too. Blake, we have time for one final question here. So let's wrap it up with a positive question about the future.
Last year we went to the women's tournament. What are we planning on doing this year?
This year, we plan on winning the women's tournament. We have a lot of returners that were successful last year, and their leadership has been everything this upcoming season because they know what it takes to get there. So being able to implement that with our new players is key. But our goal is to get there and to win.
Thus far in the young season, you've got two freshmen that are averaging over 17 minutes a game. That'd be Anae Robinson and Allison Yoder. We haven't heard Allison Yoder's name. She was very impressive in that first game. Just send us off with a little scouting report on Allison and why she's gotten so many minutes this year.
Allison is just a hard worker, offensively and defensively. Allison is probably the most coachable student athlete that I have met in a long time.
What a compliment.
Oh, man. She is the type of kid that is going to come in, she's going to compete, she's going to work hard, and if there's any adjustments to be made, I call it a superpower. She's able to make adjustments on the fly, offensively and defensively. I think that Allison's is starting to gain momentum. She's getting more confident. Her teammates are empowering her more. And in our last game, Allison had 2 steals and breakaway layups. And I mean, before Allison wouldn't do that. So now I think she's starting to get more and more confident. And man, I cannot wait to see Allison progress.
That's awesome. Well, listen, we are so happy to have you here. What an amazing start to the season. We're going to be there with you every step of the way. Of course, we'll be calling every home game on our YouTube channel. And I just hope if there's anything that I can personally ever do or my team can ever do, that you please let us know. And we are here to support you and to see this train continue to the tournament and bring home a victory for Central Penn Knights.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Of course, I just want to thank you, Blake. You've done a really fantastic job, even just early on this season, and I'm looking forward to joining you as part of the basketball coverage for this year. So keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
You got it. And Stasia King, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and talk more about the team. And of course, we're looking forward to supporting you all the way.
Thank you.
All right. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. For Stasia King and Blake Myers, this is Professor Paul Miller, and I'll see you next time on the Nightly News Podcast.
This is Andrew Hunter, Nightly News sports reporter, and you're listening to the Nightly News Podcast.
To the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I'm so honored to be joined by one of my favorite guests, a veteran to the podcast, and it would be the Director of Career Services, Steve Hassinger. Steve, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Paul. It's always a privilege to be here, and I always enjoy doing the podcast with you.
And just real quick before we get too far out, I did want to kind of, since I had you in, we got to do CPAC again. First of all, Steve, do you have some lucky rabbit's foot as far as the weather goes? Because the last 2 times at CPAC has been the most beautiful weather that I can remember just the whole day in general.
Yeah, whenever you plan an outdoor event in October, or last year it was actually November 2nd, and we got super lucky with that weather for that day. It was like in the 70s on November 2nd. This year was beautiful, I think upper 60s, beautiful sunny day. So great day to be out, and it's always a good day to network. Right.
And the one thing I did want to say, because I don't want to delay talking to our guest, over 100 people. It looked like there was about a 20% increase year over year in student participation.
Yeah, I think last year we had 91. This year we were at 104, I believe.
So
sounds good.
Yeah, about 13%. Yeah. But still, any growth, and it just kind of goes back, and we can have this conversation on another episode, but it just goes back to really the evolution of how job seeking is actually going, and how this tailgate and relate idea for this job fair seems to be gaining some traction.
Yeah, I think so. It's a less formal setting. It's an opportunity to get outside and to meet employers. obviously you want to come looking presentable, but you don't have to come suit, tie,
Right.
all dressed up to the T's. So I think students appreciate that. I think it's a little less intimidating for students to meet employers that way. So they seem to enjoy it.
Well, excellent. All right, we would love to welcome Karen A. Young. Karen is a speaker, author, and consultant whose most recent book, Sought After: How to Be Heard, Be Trusted, and Be Recognized for Your Expertise, is in stores now. Karen, thank you so much for joining us here in Summerdale. And you came from one of my classes and talked to very inspiring messages. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
My absolute pleasure.
So one of the things that I really wanted to bring us all together for today was I wanted to have a conversation from some different perspectives about not only just a student who's trying to get into their first career position, but later in the show, maybe talk a little bit more about some different paths to take for people who might be a little bit into their career and maybe looking for a career change or just a new job, maybe some tips there. So let's start off with our entry-level students. So this is really going out to our students right now, getting ready to either start looking for those internship positions, or maybe you've done your internship already, you're looking for that first career position. Let's talk about some tips that these individuals can take, not only in preparing themselves for, say, interviewing, but even just how to look for jobs that might be of interest to them. So, Steve, I'm going to start off with you. One of the things I find happens quite frequently is that when students get out and they're going out to start applying for their first entry-level job, that they're just going to apply for literally anything that is anywhere in the neighborhood of what they hope to do. So can you give our students some tips on maybe how to approach, maybe how many companies they should be reaching out to, how many is reasonable for them to kind of juggle at the same time? Because in the end, I've always heard finding a job is a job itself. So talk to me a little bit more about some tips you might be able to give.
Well, absolutely, and I think you're talking about what we call the shotgun approach. Let's just plant those resumes wherever we can, right? And I would encourage students to have a little bit more of a plan as they go out there. So whenever somebody comes to me and says, I'm looking for a job, all right, first thing I want to know is what type of job, what type of company, do you want a large company, a small company, what geographical area? And that's something that some of our students haven't even really given a whole lot of thought to yet. So we got to start there. Where are we narrowing the search, or are we narrowing the search? Is it going to be broad? Sometimes a student will say, well, I don't have any real ties right now, so I'll go wherever the jobs are. So we've got to figure out those things, and that's kind of where we start with the plan. As you know, we have a tool now called Handshake, which is the number one app that employers across the country are using to recruit college students and new college graduates. So I certainly encourage them to build out their profile on Handshake. You and I are obviously big advocates of LinkedIn as well, and building that network on LinkedIn. So that's important. And then the other thing I want to say about preparing for interviewing, I find that our students tend to not sell themselves enough. And I always tell them, you've got to be confident in your abilities and what you have to offer the employer. And I always tell them there's a line between confidence and cockiness, right? I can't tell you where it is, but I can feel it, right, when you cross it. So I don't want you to go out there being cocky, but I do want you to be confident because you have learned and done things, hopefully by this point, that are going to be valuable to your next employer. And then finally, I tell them, think forward when you're writing your resume, all right? Don't think backwards. And thinking backwards, what I mean by that is we think about, well, these are the jobs that I've had, and, this is what I've done. So I was a waiter or a waitress. So I write on my resume, I waited on tables, I bussed tables, I operated the cash register. Well, yeah, great. We all know that a waiter or a waitress does that, right? Think forward. What's the job you want to get? And what are those transferable skills that you gained on those jobs that are going to transfer to the job you want? You want to be a probation officer? Guess what? You're going to need to use some customer resolution skills, right? Or maybe de-escalation skills, whatever the case may be. So assuming that it's true, that you've used them successfully in those jobs, I would rather see those types of things, able to resolve customer concerns in an effective manner that led to repeat business.
Karen, one of the things that we just talked about in class, you gave a marvelous example of how you were developing experience and expertise in personnel in one of your previous positions. I would love if you would share that with us as sort of transitioning from what Steve was saying with transferable skills. Share with us about your experience, how you were developing the skills that you wanted to have.
Absolutely. And let me reinforce what Steve said with a real life story, real situation. Graduated with 2 degrees, business administration and psychology, because there was no such thing as a personnel major, a personnel track, or human resources didn't even exist back in the dark ages when I graduated. There was no way to get into personnel human resources unless you had personnel experience. Well, how do you get personnel experience if you can't get a personnel job? So what I did, I returned to Wendy's. I had started there when I was 16 as a crew member. In college, I was a crew leader. After college, I became an assistant manager for them. I accepted all of the, quote, personnel, end quote, responsibilities for the store. I interviewed, I hired, I disciplined, I terminated, I handled workers' compensation, I handled employee complaints, I did all of the personnel functions. My store manager was thrilled because nobody likes HR, right? Okay, except me.
I was going to say, well, some people do. There's an
I
entire
do.
industry.
I do. One of our core values is HR is fun. So I took those transferable skills, and when I built my resume, when it was time to move on and actually go and get a job, I used all of those transferable skills, not as a restaurant manager, but as a personnel professional. These are the experiences that I had. These are the successes I've had. These are the things that I learned in addition to my internship and my college. And it worked.
And, one of the things that I shared right after, Karen was talking about that is my first quote-unquote marketing job was actually at one of the restaurants that I was working at. Mm-hmm. I was helping to do promotions. I was putting events together. I was creating a social media content calendar. I was just doing all of these things, and that is still on my resume to this day, that was one of the, first marketing positions that I had. And one of the things that I reiterated to my class after Karen talked about it, a lot of the times we do need to kind of create opportunities for ourselves, whether it be at the current positions that we have, taking ownership of some things that are going to allow you to build some experience and build those transferable skills, or in other capacities. So Steve, in terms of entry level career seekers, what might be some tips that you can give them about things that they can do, whether it be at their job or other places in the community, to help build that experience level for their resumes as they look for their first job?
Well, Paul, I know you are a huge proponent of community service, as am I, right? So if there's not a job out there waiting for you to help you build those skills, why not seek out a nonprofit that you care about in your community and go out to them? And let's use the marketing example. I mean, how many nonprofits would turn away somebody who came out and said, hey, would you like me to design some catchy flyers for you for this next event that you have going on, using Canva or whatever the case may be? Social media. I know a lot of your students are, look at social media as something that they might want to do. So, there might be a nonprofit agency out there that could really use some help with their social media and helping to push that out. So looking for opportunities in the community and creating those opportunities for yourself. Because the number one complaint that new college graduates have when they come back to me is, man, it seems like everybody wants experience. How am I supposed to get experience? So certainly the internship is really important for that, but also community service. And even here on campus, or if you're even not on campus, if you're an online student, getting involved with a club or an organization. I mean, the nightly news club that you oversee and Professor Lyra Limpy, they're coming out with a portfolio of work that they've done as part of their work with the Nightly News Club. So getting involved in those clubs or organizations as well.
And I also just pointed out in class, it's not even just about what club you join. Like you really should try to go out of your way to get into some type of office or position or some type of leadership position, because another thing that you're notorious for saying is that employers come to you and just say, we're looking for leaders. Mm-hmm. And the student needs to be able to demonstrate that they have some type of leadership skills.
Absolutely.
So to that point, Karen, you're constant, maybe not you're as much in the weeds as you used to be in terms of daily hiring and firing decisions. But what I can say is you have certainly hired numerous positions over the years, probably hundreds of different positions. What are the things that when you're looking at a resume for the first time that really stand out to you, especially for an entry-level employee?
Great question. I am looking for those transferable skills. Okay. If you worked at a restaurant, if you waited tables, I don't care about that. I'm looking for how you're presenting the experiences that you gained during that employment. I'm also looking for those leadership positions. Were you active in your, were you active in your community? Were you active in whatever committee or club that you joined? Because you will learn leadership skills through those committees and through that volunteer experience. I'm also looking for someone that can present themselves in writing and, not just via text, but someone that can do a professional letter. And that's why,
It's a lost art.
And it is. Following up on Steve's comment about the shotgun approach for applying for jobs, try not to do that, because if you send me a specific cover letter that is specific to what I'm looking for, you have gotten my attention immediately, because people do not do that anymore. Even if you're not qualified, the fact that you took the time to send me a letter with your resume explaining to me why you believe your resume is a fit, you are going to stand out to me. I may not need you for that position, but I guarantee you I'm keeping your name and your information to the side because I like that responsibility that you took to contact me directly off of a position that I was looking, and that you took the time to learn about my organization, learn about my position, and say, I'm interested because my qualifications are a fit because. So customizing your cover letter is so important, and so few people send cover letters nowadays.
Here's what's really interesting. So in part of the Writing for Digital Media class that I do, it's a lot of putting together your LinkedIn page and resume writing. One of the things that I really try to get in their minds is I don't care if it says optional cover letter. It's a trick. It's a trap. They're saying optional because they want to see who's going to go above and beyond and send in not only just a cover letter, but to your point, a tailored cover letter to that specific organization.
And you hit the nail on the head with that. It is optional. It's legitimately optional.
I guess in the grand scheme of things,
it is. In the grand scheme of things.
It's optional.
But if you want to set yourself apart, send me a cover letter. If you want to stand out, send me a customized cover letter. I haven't applied through LinkedIn. I haven't applied through the job boards, but I am 99% sure there is a way to attach something beyond your resume.
There is.
So take the effort. If it's a job you really want, it is worth the extra 15, 20 minutes to do that exercise. I promise you, you will stand out. Our team, we chat on Teams with each other. Oh my God, I got a cover letter. And we're all like, yeah.
It's so surprising that the art of the cover letter has just gone away. I mean, it's still such a crucial piece of the job search process. I mean, I have to sit and talk about the importance of just a resume and having a well-done resume. And I get to see students' resumes, which between Steve and I, we really, and Kristen, of course, too, we really hope to help students by the time they get out of here have a solid resume. But so I do want to switch gears here real quick because, of course, our entry-level students, we talk about this a lot. You do so much for students who are looking for their first career positions. What about if there's an alumni out there, just got done with homecoming, saw a lot of great alumni. What if there's alumni out there that are saying, you know what, maybe I'm not happy with my job. Maybe I want to switch jobs, or maybe even want to switch careers at this point. What is some tips, Steve, that you would give somebody who is going from one career to another but may on paper not have the quote-unquote experience that they're looking for in the field?
Yeah, well, again, that transferability is so important for the job changer as well. So now we need to go back and we need to look at that resume. Maybe we had it tailored to that previous field, that previous job. We may need to go back and totally rewrite it, right, to focus on the things that are transferable. I'll give you an example from my wife. All right, I don't think she would mind me using this example, but she was the business manager of a dental office for 23 years. And when she decided that she wanted to change and get into another area, she applied for a position with the state, and it was a human resources position. And when I looked at the posting and she applied and said, yeah, you're qualified for this. Well, she got a notice from the state saying, no, you don't meet the qualifications for this position. I said, well, that doesn't make sense. You do meet the qualifications. Let me see, the application, the resume that you submitted. She focused on those things that she did most often in her 23 years. So, handling accounts payable, accounts receivable, all those other types of things. What she didn't include was that she was the HIPAA compliance manager for 3 offices, that she had written a training manual for the for the staff of those 3 offices and so forth. So, that transferability, going back and re-looking at what we have and making it transferable to the job that we want, again, is extremely important. And then, if there are skills that you think maybe you're lacking in that job, we have so many opportunities now to pick up even just short-term training. We offer certificates here that are 18 credits. So you've worked in business, now you want to get in HR, you can pick up an HR certificate. And let's not forget about YouTube.
Well, let's talk more about career services real quick. I think this is as good as any. Like, not only, of course, are our current students always welcome in the career service office, but if you're an alumni of Central Penn College, they can always come back to you for no additional cost.
Right.
So if there's anybody out there that is interested in maybe changing, career paths, let's talk to Steve or Kristen in Career Services. And Steve, please feel free to give a quick plug for all the wonderful things that you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll help you with what I call the nuts and bolts of job searching. So, we'll help you with revamping that resume. We won't write it for you, but we'll help you with, revamping it, editing it. We'll help you with the cover letter preparation, proofread those cover letters for you and make sure that you've got them, A-OK to go. We have tools available to assist with that. So we have tools called, Handshake, Skills First, Handshake for job searching, Skills First to help with resumes, with interview skills. You can go on there and you can queue up an interview for over 600 different types of jobs and get questions geared specifically towards those types of jobs. We will do a mock interview with you. If it's somebody who's changing careers, maybe they've worked at the same place for a long time, or maybe they've been out of the workforce for a little while, with family obligations or something like that, and they haven't interviewed for a long time. Interviewing nowadays can be a lot different.
Oh, yeah.
Than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So we can help you kind of get up to date with that and do some mock interviewing as well to prepare you. So there's a lot of different things. And all of our events that we do, job fairs, et cetera, are available to our alumni as well.
Business Partner of the Year breakfast, which is how I got to meet
Absolutely.
Ms. Young. But honestly, if you have any questions about any of these things, you can always reach out to careerservices@centralpenn.edu. Well, Karen, I want to ask you the same question.
Sure.
So somebody is, maybe 10 years into their career, it's just not speaking to them, but there's something else maybe they're interested in, and how do they go about kind of moving from one thing to another, even though the experience isn't there beyond the transferability of the things that we have done previously?
So one thing that Steve did not touch on, and it's been a long time since I've even heard the phrase, informational interviews. Reach out to someone that is doing the job that you want. Not for the sake of getting their job, but help me understand what your day-to-day looks like. Here's my background. How might I fit into a role similar to yours? Do an informational interview. Most people are more than glad to talk about themselves and to talk about their position as long as they realize you're not gunning for their job. So gather some information, learn about the actual job, ask individuals in that job, how would my background fit? What transferable skills do you see in my background? And build on that as you reach out to potential employers. And networking. My father taught me a long time ago, the best job you're ever going to get is the one that you did not apply for. Sorry, Steve.
Mm-hmm. No, the hidden job market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Getting out, shaking hands with people, not applying to every job on the market. And this would work for new graduates as well. Talking to everybody you know. I am looking to make a career change. I've spent the last 10 years doing this work. I'd like to transition into this. Who do you know the first 5 people you speak to might not know anybody, or they may not share right away. But that's not to say that Steve's not going to send Karen an email and say, hey, do you know anybody that's looking for this? So Steve may be doing some networking that you don't even know about. So get the word out that you're looking to make a change. Shake hands. Attend Chamber of Commerce events. Most likely either your current employer is a member. The Central Penn is a member. You could register as a Central Penn participant in the Harrisburg Regional Chamber. Get out to their free networking events. Shake hands. Meet business professionals. Share your story.
100%. And that's another thing, too, is, of course, we do have all types of different job fairs here on campus, but there are job fairs all over the place. There are both in-person and virtual, so you can do that. And I would also just say, make sure that you're also following up with anyone who you do meet in person on LinkedIn. One of the things that I continuously come back to, not, again, people of all ages, of all backgrounds, LinkedIn is almost like a bookmark for your networking. Like, I remember meeting you, we had this conversation, I'm going to connect with you, and then as you go over time, your network grows and grows, and then you're never going to not have some place to turn. In fact, you might have too many places to turn. Well, Karen, we are coming to the end of the show. I did want to just talk a bit more about your book.
Oh.
Do you mind sharing with us a little bit more about Sought After, how to be heard, be trusted, and be recognized for your expertise? Where did this come from? Like, how did you get into being an author?
Thank you. Well, I got into being an author through my first book, Honest and Real, an essential guidebook to drama-free human resources, because all of my marketing friends said, you know so much, you have to write a book so you can share with more people. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. Writing that book was simple. Sought After was born when I walked off my first national stage. I was so terrified when I walked onto the stage, and I was so energized when I got off the stage. I called my publisher before I even called my husband and said, there must be more of this. I must do more. And that is how Sought After was born. It went through a couple of name changes, which is the neat thing about working directly with a publisher instead of self-publishing. You have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And it really talks about what I believe are the 4 building blocks that got me to a point where people seek me out now. I am paid for my advice, which still, I'm a Central Pennsylvania girl, and it boggles my mind sometimes. I'm like, people pay me for this. Wow, how cool is that? But it really came about from that and helping others understand. You don't have to be chairman of the board. You don't have to be a chief financial officer to be sought out. You need to know your stuff. You need to know their stuff. You need to know the business that you're working in. You need to understand how your job interrelates to the success of the business. You need to know how to communicate to others. So it doesn't matter my communication style. If I want to be heard, I have to speak in my audience's style. And then you have to embrace change. Change is a fact of life. Sometimes it's a miserable fact of life. But the less we are miserable about change and the more we embrace it publicly and discuss it privately, discuss your concerns privately, but the more we embrace it publicly, the more people are going to turn to us as a steady influence, as a steady communicator, as a person of influence. People are going to turn to us. So that's really, and my publisher told me that this was the book I was born to write.
Well, that's always wonderful to hear. Again, that's Karen Young, Sought After, How to Be Heard, Be Trusted, and Be Recognized for Your Expertise at any local bookstores, or you can go to KarenAYoung.com and find all the information about Karen and more information about the book and grab yourself a copy, and she would be honored to sign it when you get to meet her down the road. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. It's always such a pleasure to have you on talking about the wonderful things you are doing, and certainly much appreciated the advice that you're handing out to our, not only even our current students, but our alumni as well.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to be on with Karen because I've known Karen for probably 20 years, and Karen has hosted interns from here and helped them get started, young interns as well as those career changers, as a matter of fact. So she's been a great business partner for us.
And speaking of which, not only were you the keynote speaker of the Business Partner of the Year breakfast, you've hosted our interns. Steve, did you know both her mom and sister came to Central Penn College?
It was Central Penn Business School
right.
at that time, yes. My mother had a certificate in secretarial services and went on to work for the state. until she had children, and my sister had a certificate in accounting.
That is so cool. Like the connection that you have with Central Penn, you continue to come and inspire our students. I thank you so much for coming to my class today. Thank you so much for being on the show. Karen, we absolutely love you. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and thank you for your continued dedication to helping Central Penn College.
Well, I love Central Penn College as well, and thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nightly News Podcast. Wanted to thank author, speaker, entrepreneur Karen A. Young for being here today, as well as the Director of Career Services, Steve Hassinger. Thank you both for taking time out of your day to be here on the Nightly News Podcast. All right, that's going to do it. We'll see you again next time.